I like to say that the agents are simultaneously incredibly sophisticated and also not the sharpest tools in the box, right? Because by themselves, they don't know anything about our organizational context, our operations, our processes, our policies, and they certainly don't know anything about our customers.
Welcome to episode 28 of It's About Data. This episode, we're chatting with Martin Willcox of Teradata about agents, context, customers, and vectorization.
All right, good. We are here for a special episode of the It's About Data podcast, recorded from Los Angeles, California, for Teradata Possible 2025. With us is Martin Willcox, who runs Teradata's global teams that run on AI, basically. Maybe you can say a bit more, but you were on stage with us earlier. It was fantastic.
Right.
You suffered to us earlier.
Yes. Thank you for letting me join the data gang on a temporary basis. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I have the pleasure, I have the privilege of running Teradata's global field AI and machine learning teams. The field teams that engage with customers every day to explain the set of capabilities that we have and to engage in proof of concept and early stage technology demonstrators.
So, yes. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, so has anybody been talking about agents?
Just a little.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little. Agents has been the conversation of this year, I think, hasn't it, around AI and machine learning. And it's been really interesting to see how quickly that conversation has developed. And for us, the model context protocol piece that I assume we're going to discuss and that we discussed this morning is really, really interesting because I like to say that the agents are simultaneously incredibly sophisticated and also not the sharpest tools in the box, right? Because by themselves, they don't know anything about our organizational context, our operations, our processes, our policies, and they certainly don't know anything about our customers. And particularly in the B2C industries, right now for us anyway, the big and exciting projects are all in the kind of AI for CX space about improving customer experience. And very often we're trying to finally realize the promise of hyper-personalization. I mean, it's only been 20, 30 years we've been talking about it, right? Finally, it feels like this time we're serious. And if we're serious about having agents create individualized treatment plans, then they need to know something about the individuals they're creating those treatment plans for, and by themselves they don't. All of that context is in our backend and data and analytic platforms. So connecting the agents with the backend platforms like Teradata is really where the magic happens, we think.
Okay, so tell me some about the teams you interface with in the field. Is there a lot of data scientists, machine learning engineers, product managers?
Yeah, so I run the global field team. So
Right.
we're up to, I think, roughly 30 field data scientists now, and those people are engaging with customers every day. So we do a variety of things, all the kind of things you would expect a vendor to do. So we talk about innovation days, which are, you can think of them as mini enablement sessions. We bring a bunch of our smart people, customer brings a bunch of their smart people. We get together, we show them what's possible with Teradata. We do demonstrations, and more interestingly, we're moving towards this kind of forward deployed model that I think you heard Steve talk about the other day. So we will have done by the end of the year on the current trajectory, we'll have done 200 AI and machine learning POCs for our customers globally by the end of the year. Those are creating a lot of value for our customers. And now what we want to try and do is extend that value because there can be huge value in a well-constructed POC. But really our ambition, I think, across the industry is to make sure that innovation is getting out of the lab and into production, where it's actually changing the way we do business. And we think there's a really real opportunity with that forward deployed team we've built to help our customers make sure they're getting stuff into production reliably and on time, so that we are actually generating some return from all this lovely investment in technology we're all making.
So what does this mean for data? What does this mean for making data AI ready and agent ready?
That's a huge question right there, isn't it? So I think there's a couple of different things that are really important right now. So the first for us, and I talk about this a lot, we're very focused right now on large language models as enablers of agents. Systems that can act with some level of agency, some level of autonomy that can orchestrate end-to-end business processes. And that's really, really exciting. But the other thing that we shouldn't lose sight of, particularly if we're talking about data, the other superpower of this new generation of models is making sense of unstructured data, images, audio, and especially right now, text and language. And I mean, it's the oldest cliche in the book, right? That there's huge value in all that unstructured information that we have in organizations, as much as 80% of the total by volume. But the previous generation of text analytic methods we've had have kind of been clunky, right? So most of that data goes unused for analytics most of the time in our experience. So enabling our customers to finally unlock that information and to leverage it for analytics is a really, really exciting part of that. I'll give you a specific example if you'd like in a minute. So I think that's one whole area. And for us, that's really, really related to the work we're doing on the vector store. Then the other piece from a data perspective, of course, is the idea of AI for data management. A lot of people have been building data platforms over 2 or even 3 decades. The team that's now responsible for the data platform has changed half a dozen times in that period. And, you know, we have customers that have data platforms that are absolutely critical to their operations, which aren't always documented to the standard they'd like them to be. They might not understand the lineage of those systems to the extent they'd like to. There are lots of data lab environments on those alongside those production platforms, and sometimes we understand which data has been duplicated, and sometimes we don't understand which data has been duplicated.
We've been pretty optimistic.
Yeah,
actually.
that's been. I'm a British guy. We'd like to do the understated. And then, you know, just all the day-to-day stuff, right? All the database administration, management, index selection, making sure that we've got correct permissions, et cetera, et cetera. So there's clearly huge potential for agentic solutions to help us in that whole space as well. And that's something we focus a lot on with the current version of the MCP server technology we've developed. I think one of the things that distinguishes some of the work that we've done from some of the work that others have done is that our MCP server, even the community edition, ships with a whole range of tools. And those tools right now are biased towards that whole data management piece, just because there's been such huge interest in our customer base in using the technology to that end.
Well, let me ask you a related question. So unstructured data, using it is hard, but also it presents a whole bunch of difficulties with quality, security, privacy. All the usual topics become more complicated. So tell us about your approach to those problems with unstructured data.
Yeah, the typical approach that we're using for a lot of our projects right now is basically to use the new generation of embedding models to vectorize that data. So we take a ton of unstructured data, we vectorize it, and then what we typically do, and it a little bit depends on the use case and a little bit depends on the context, but typically we're clustering that data some way, somehow, as an exercise in dimensionality reduction very often. And it's kind of interesting. We've done a bunch of projects and we tried using PCA a couple of times. We didn't have great results. And there's some academic research that suggests that PCA isn't a good fit. But good old-fashioned K-means, it turns out, is really, really interesting. So the workflow we use a lot, not exclusively, but the workflow we use a lot is vectorize the unstructured information, generate a set of clusters and subclusters. We very often vectorize that information using a task-specific language model running in database. So this idea of using Teradata as a parallel harness, really, really effective for throughput-sensitive applications. And then having created those segments, we want to understand what those segments represent. And we then very often use an authentically large language model to actually generate descriptions of those segments based on the unstructured interaction data that's associated with those segments, with those centroids. And I think that's a really powerful technique for a number of reasons. And I think it's really interesting because I think you guys have seen it. There was this paper written by NVIDIA recently called Small Models Are the Future of Agentic AI.
Small is beautiful.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that paper is interesting for a number of reasons. One, this focus on smaller models that for domain-specific applications can be more accurate, less prone to hallucination. But also this idea that real-world agentic AI solutions are heterogeneous. There are parts of the chain where you absolutely need a billion parameter language model, right? If you want an agent to do reasoning and orchestration, you know, you need an authentically large language model. And there are parts of the chain, to your point, where you know, smaller models actually can be really, really valuable, and not just valuable because they can be more accurate and less prone to hallucination, but also because they're cheaper and faster to execute. And you know, if we think about the way why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because software scales more easily than smart humans. And so we really have to think about the implications for when we properly scale this technology. You know, we are talking to organizations that can envisage a near future where there's going to be an agent for every patient in the care system, for example. Well, that automatically takes you to a future where for just one set of use cases, you've got tens of millions of agents running more or less continuously, right? This is a serious scale challenge we're setting ourselves.
Anyway, let's take this forward. which is basically we start with data, we're going to end with data. It's basically we're talking about the context of data. And so, what's Teradata's strategy for basically making sure that when we talk about data in context, it's basically ensuring, assuring that the data is relevant to the to the problem that we're trying to solve, to the organization, to the industry. So, tell us basically at a very high level, what's Teradata's strategy here for delivering this data in context?
Well, it's probably not going to be a huge surprise that for us, this looks like an integrated data challenge. So let me give you a specific example. So we're doing a lot of work around AI for CX, as I mentioned. We've got a project in full production, several projects in full production, but one in particular with a big Asian bank. This is a bank that really thinks about NPS a lot, thinks NPS is a leading indicator of customer engagement, knows that even marginal improvements in NPS can have a big impact on their ability to retain customers and to cross-sell and upsell customers. Their challenge has been they just don't understand what the drivers of NPS have been. And that particular organization we worked with, and we were able to identify that they were capturing 50,000 inbound customer chats a week that were going completely unleveraged for analytics. And what a huge wasted opportunity, right? Because every single one of those interactions is a customer actually telling the bank what they want, right? So often we're building models that we use to process transaction and event data to try and infer what we think customers want. But this is a moment when a customer's telling you, sometimes in no uncertain terms, exactly what they want and exactly how you're not helping them with what they want. And the data goes unleveraged for analytics most of the time. I think that's pretty common in the B2C enterprises. So we take that data, we vectorize it, we put that in a vector store. Now I can cluster those vectors and I can infer that the communication is about a complaint, and I can get pretty specific. I can say this is almost certainly a complaint, and it's almost certainly a complaint about a disputed transaction. Well, that's nice, but what am I going to do with that?
Bingo.
Again, if we come back to this idea of wanting individualized treatment plans, well, then I need to know about the individual. Is this a high-value customer, low-value customer? Do they have 5 product holdings, 1 product holding? What are their contact preferences? What's their propensity to churn? What's their predicted customer lifetime value? If I want to make a smart decision about how to treat this individual, I need to know all of those things. And that means it's a fine thing to be able to use language models to vectorize the data. It's a fine thing to be able to cluster those vectors. But if I can't join that information back to everything else I know about the customer, I'm kind of wasting my time. Mm-hmm. So, for us, this is a study in integration. Maybe we're biased. We are the kind of integrated data company. But for us also, comes back to this central role of MCP in enabling us to connect the agents that we're building to the back-end data stores where that context exists. I think if there's no MCP, there's no context. And if there's no context, there's really no agentic AI, and it's game over before we even got started.
It would just be model protocol.
Yeah, which is kind of what we had before RAG and any of this stuff. You just feed in stuff and you get random information. Oh, right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, Martin, we really enjoyed having these very intense discussions over the last few days and learning a lot about just what customers are talking to you about agents and about preserving context. Matt, do you have anything more you'd like to ask?
I think that's it. Where can people find you if they're interested in looking at?
Well, I am martin.willcox@teradata.com.
Okay.
Willcox with 2 L's. Long story.
Okay.
So reach out to me. We're really happy to have a conversation with anybody that cares to about how we can help them deliver on the promise of agentic AI. And on a personal note, thank you for letting me join the gang temporarily.
That was a lot of fun.
Next year, I'm going to wear a black shirt.
Exactly.
Okay.
It was possible. Thanks, Martin.
Man.
Thank you.
Good talking.